Good Friday to you. I begin this Friday Week in Review show with an acknowledgement that my listeners in Texas thought I was very, very unfair to Senator Cruz 2 days ago when I used my studio art, which is the Cleveland Plain Dealer cover from January when the Ohio State University Buckeyes won the first ever real playoff structure to take home the ring for college football. Therefore, because of that criticism, I have waived the dress code rules today. We normally have a collared shirt rule, but John Ellis, founder and managing editor of News Items, is proudly wearing his Longhorns t-shirt today. You know, John, I didn't realize it was this traumatic for Senator Cruz and you. I don't know that the Longhorns will ever get their mojo back, but I'm glad you're still in the game.
Well, my daughter went to the University of Texas and the University of Texas Law School, so we're hook 'em horns all the way.
So Senator Cruz predicted that two teams would meet again, not just next year, which is inevitable, that's scheduled, but in the playoffs this year. Do you agree with him?
I have no idea. I know nothing about college football. I just root for Texas, you know.
Okay. Let's get then to the big stories of the week. Number one, and I really got to admit, until I got your note, I hadn't paid much attention to this. The Google antitrust suit. Why does it matter, John Ellis?
Well, it matters because of what the judge, didn't do. What the judge didn't do was force Google to spin off its Chrome browser, and that was an acknowledgement. The judge ruled last year that Google had illegally barred other people from getting into the search market and therefore controlled 90% of the search market. Now the environment is, can Google survive, OpenAI and Perplexity and Anthropic and these other AI, essentially search engines? So the judge's decision to not require Google to divest itself of Chrome was really an acknowledgement that the search engine game had completely changed. So that was number one. Number two, I think, although the judge didn't say this in the 232-page ruling, but I think it's important to sort of point out that Google is a leader in AI. DeepMind is one of the top AI companies in the world. And Google is also a leader, one of the two leaders in the US side of things, along with IBM, in quantum computing. And both of those enterprises, if you will, require vast amounts of money to make them work and to do the research and so on and so forth. So the judge essentially giving Google a pass to keep it as a financially robust company is probably best in the interest of the United States, because we don't want China to beat us on AI and we don't want China to beat us on quantum.
Well, that is a wonderful dose of judicial humility. I'm not sure that the Congress and the executive branch will agree, but I'm glad the third branch doesn't get involved. Story number two. Again, I saw this in News Items this week, and I was unaware of the fact that clanker, in quotes, clanker, had become the go-to slur against AI on social media. When did this begin, and how big is it?
It's apparently, this is the first I had heard of it. That's how clueless I am. But I came across this story in the New York Times, and apparently the posts about the phrase clankers have amassed hundreds of millions of views on TikTok and Instagram. And this is being driven basically, they think, by Gen Z and Gen Alpha posters. Clankers is essentially reaction to the creeping AIification of everything. And so if you call, I don't know, XYZ customer service and you get AI on the other line, and they delay you until they hope that you hang up, that's known as a clanker. And it's sort of a movement now, in the same way, I guess, that, MAGA was a movement. Now there's the clanker movement.
I'm going to join that if
goes.
I end up in another waiting room from hell talking to an airline representative that isn't really there, trying to figure out where I'm going next. Third story. In fact, there are a couple of stories this week in news items about Alzheimer's. You've highlighted the University of Bath research, but there was also another one. I can't. You always cover this medical developments. What did the University of Bath come up with vis-a-vis Alzheimer's?
Well, they came up with something called fastball EEG, which is a 3-minute passive test that records electrical activity in the brain while participants view a stream of images. So you're there, you've got this thing on, and you're looking at, pictures of Instagram turning over or whatever. And it can reliably identify memory problems in people who have mild cognitive impairment, which is MCI in the jargon. But it's a condition, MCI is a condition that can lead to Alzheimer's. So the thing that's exciting about it is you can do it at home, right? It takes 3 minutes, and it gives your physician or your neurologist or whatever a picture of your risk factor for Alzheimer's 3, 4, maybe even 5 years before it would be otherwise identified by whatever means. So I have a lot of stuff about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in my newsletter because a lot of my newsletter readers and subscribers are 60 years old or older. But this is an astonishing development, and presumably, if it's rolled out in a big time way, then a lot of people will be able to, do what remedial work they can do or remedial therapies they can do to prevent Alzheimer's from ruining their lives.
One of the things I have learned from news item is that the drug pipeline for Alzheimer's treatment via the dissolving of the proteins that attach to the neural connections is pretty far advanced. So there's better ways to find it, and there are better ways to fight it, and you'll learn all about it at news items. Last story, and I left the most time for this. Inflation is, 2.7% right now, but you sent me the rundown on the fact that inflation legacy is a real deal, or legacy inflation. Please explain.
Well, I don't know if you and I have talked about this in the past, but the Biden administration in the last 2 years or whatever, last 18 months, kept insisting that inflation was coming down, right? But what people, don't really understand is a sort of a common misconception that prices come down when inflation cools. That's the general idea, right? Inflation is cooling, prices come down. But the reality is a period of high inflation leaves a legacy of high prices. So in simple terms, if something cost $2 and there was 10% inflation over 2 years, then that thing would cost $2.20. If inflation then slows to 2%, you would think that it's gone down 2% from where it was, but it's actually you just add the 2% to the 10% already, and so the mismatch between being told that inflation is coming down and the reality, which is that the price of whatever you're buying is 22% more. That was the disconnect that the Biden campaign apparently didn't understand or didn't want you to understand. But everybody did understand it. The price of beans or the price of something had dramatically increased, and the inflation on top of that made it ever more expensive.
Now, John, this is off the cuff. The news this morning is the jobs report was disappointing with only 22,000 net jobs. Now, the private sector added 37,000 and the public sector shed some. So that's a slightly rosier picture. But the market is down, and I would have thought the market would have gone up with a bad jobs report. So I never predict markets, but were you surprised by that?
I was a little bit. I was really surprised by the jobs number going down because, there's so much being done on the AI data center. I mean, people are building data centers all over the country. The Beige Book that came out in August was basically, metro area after metro area growth is being driven by data centers. Well, to build a data center, you need, construction equipment, and you need people to do the job and install the servers and all of the work that goes into building a data center. And that didn't really show up. Manufacturing jobs have been down since January. So that was surprising to me. I wasn't surprised overall because Doge sort of takes
Yep.
effect, government employees, etc. So anyway.
John Ellis of News Items, thank you as always. Follow him on X at Ellis Items and go to Substack for your News Item subscription. It's what I read first every single morning, between a dozen and 20 items from around the world that keep you smart or make you smarter. Thank you, John. Go Bucks! I used to introduce Eli Lake every single Friday as the host of the Breaking History podcast and a contributor to the Free Press. He's still the host of the Breaking History podcast, but I think he works for CBS now. I'm not sure. Eli, do we know yet?
I don't want to say anything because I think that some of the reporting has been correct, but I'm not involved in any of the negotiations or anything, so I don't want to.
Well, please keep doing Breaking History, even if you go over and it becomes the Tiffany Network's Breaking History. I must say, the latest episode on James Jesus Angleton is fabulous. But I'm already a Kim Philby nut, and I'm an Alger Hiss nut, and I know about. Have you ever read Dan Silva's novels? Danny Silva wrote a book called The Other Woman, which is all about. Kim Philby
I haven't read Dan
Silva.
I've read Le Carre and I've read Graham Greene, and for this episode, I read a great Norman Mailer novel called Harlot's Ghost, which is all about a lot of these things. But I'll put Silva in my list because I love good spy novels.
Yeah, it's The Other Woman. I think it's his 2018 or 2019 book. And, some people start at the beginning and go to the end, but it's not necessary. For this purpose, when you are in the zone, the Philby Angleton zone, then you need to read that. Now, let me tell people, I find Russia to be incredibly easy. Comey, Brennan, and Clapper decided to take out Trump, and they cooked it up with the assistance, unwitting, of Hillary Clinton, and a little assist from Russia that didn't know what was going on. But boy, Eli, did you break it down with the audio from John Brennan and the back story from Angleton. Why don't you tell people about Angleton and how it matters to Russia?
Well, okay, so I want to say James Jesus Angleton is one of the most, I think, brilliant figures in American 20th century history. He's somebody who, if he had not gone into espionage, would have been, I think, a literary critic or an editor of sorts, because his first love was poetry, and he used the sort of tools of literary criticism as somebody who, tried to decipher the true meanings of, foreign agents and so forth. And so that's where he, that's where he comes from. And what Angleton really was is he invented the counterintelligence executive for the CIA. That's the heart of any intelligence service. And his very close friend, Kim Philby, in my view, was probably the most successful traitor, at least of modern times. And it was a crushing blow when he finally learned that his dear friend and collaborator, and they had worked together in World War II against the Nazis. In many ways, Angleton learned the craft and the dark arts of intelligence from Philby. Was a Soviet agent all these years, and I think that made him somebody who didn't trust anything around him, and it was sort of the opposite of credulity. He didn't believe anything, and as a result, he did great damage searching for a phantom mole inside the CIA. The CIA had, I think, a reliable defector in Yuri Nosenko, who told them early on that the Soviets didn't have anything to do with the Lee Harvey Oswald coming back to the United States and eventually, sadly, assassinating John F. Kennedy. Angleton didn't believe it and had him effectively kind of detained and tortured, psychologically at least, for nearly 5 years. And it was, I think, in this period that Angleton came to believe that the Russians had an ability not just to do the standard stuff in the Cold War of spy versus spy, but to hack the consciousness of regular Americans. That is the underlying theory of Russiagate, that the Russian meddling in the 2016 election was responsible for electing Trump because it changed the minds of Americans. And I think that you and I would say that I think we both agree that yes, the Russians did hacking and they did the leaking and they did, kind of, I think, feckless, but nonetheless they did some social media manipulation. Not as much as was originally claimed. But
I
that
would call it
doesn't.
non-material interference. So
Yeah,
they were there, they were screwing around. I don't think they affected the outcome of any electoral college votes. Do we agree?
I think that's right. And by the way, the Soviets and before the Russians, they do this. They've done this to other elections. They've been in an information war with what they consider the United States are their greatest adversary for at least 100 years, and that to me is very Angletonian. It's this idea that American citizens on their own can't kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, separate the lies from fiction, and will believe just about anything. It's an arrogant view. It's, by the way, it's the same kind of mentality that led to all of the excessive social media regulations in the COVID era. It's what led social media companies to lock out the account in the 2020 election of the New York Post because they accurately reported on Hunter Biden's liaisons with various foreign people trying to corrupt, his father when he was a vice president. So it is a pattern. It's this idea that we can't trust the American people to think for themselves. And that, in some ways, is the sort of conceit of Angleton after his career.
I agree with you, Eli, and you make the case brilliantly in the Breaking History episode. But here's my one pushback. I routinely ask new guests, was Al Jarreau a communist spy? And they don't even know who he is. And
Of course,
that's kind of because
a communist spy. Absolutely.
Yes, he was. And he probably is the only guy in the running with Kim Philby for greatest traitor of the 20th century, because he was at FDR's elbow at Yalta. So who knows what he did to the weak and sickened FDR. But I just don't know that we can fix this. We just have to accept that the American public is not as literate as it was 25 years ago, especially people under 40.
Well, all right. I concede that I think people are reading less than they used to. But the answer to that is harder. See, I think that there is like a phony anti-disinformation industry that says we can fix this problem by having like NewsGuard. We're going to like check for fake news on everything on the internet and things like that. That's not the answer. The answer is you have to rethink how our education system works. You have to teach people things like media literacy, critical thinking. You have to go back to teaching the classics. You have to, like take a page from Alan Bloom, go back to the idea of a canon. Teach people how to think. That's what we need to do, and that's something that we've lost in the last 50 years. And that's it's like a generational project, and you don't have an easy policy fix for it. So that's how I would.
People have to curate their intake. They have to. There's only so many hours in a day. You have to say, I'm going to listen to commentary and Breaking History and Hugh Hewitt and the Ruthless Podcast and Big Ben. I mean, you just got to curate your intake or you're going to be dumb as dirt. Yeah. Last word to you, Eli.
Well, I appreciate it. And I also have to say your show has been essential on the Israel stuff. I thought the Michael Oren interview, John Podhoretz, Aviv Redagor, just really essential stuff, kind of getting to the bare facts of it, especially as we're in the midst of another kind of information war against Israel. But, getting back to Russiagate, because I do think it resonates, because it was the first scandal of the Trump era, and in some ways it was sort of the first model of it. And that's why there's so much mistrust of all these institutions. To get it back requires a kind of reckoning of the other side. Andrew McCabe should no longer be on CNN. James Comey shouldn't be allowed to be teaching John Brennan, etc. There you go.
I want everyone to go and listen to this episode of Breaking History and follow Eli at Eli Lake on X. It's valuable. It is immunizing you against just terrible information. It's Friday and we are lucky. Matt Continetti is in the house. Matt has more jobs than I do. He is the head of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute. He is the Washington columnist for the Commentary magazine. He is a contributor to the Free Press. I think he writes for the Free Beacon as well. And he's just generally well known around town. Matt, are you now working for CBS? Has anyone told you you're now part of the Tiffany network?
I have not been so informed, Hugh. I'm not. I only know what I read in the papers.
Okay, I'm just saying you might actually be working for the legacy of Walter Cronkite now.
I haven't
Matt,
seen that
let's
news.
begin.
I haven't seen that breaking news yet.
Okay, I've seen the article. It's all gossip. It's all gossip. I hope it's true. I hope Barry Weiss and the Free Press have been acquired by CBS and that she will have a senior editorial position at CBS and they leave it alone then. First question, Matt. Do you believe the president had the authority to order the strike on the Venezuelan drug boat, killing 11 and sinking their cargo of fentanyl and cocaine?
Well, the president has, as you know, Hugh, Article 2 authority to protect the United States against threats. And I think under Article 2, he had the authority to conduct this operation. I think the strike is fascinating. We need to look at it along two dimensions. You know, the first is this ongoing military buildup that the U.S. is engaged in outside Venezuela. We have a large flotilla there, parked off of Venezuela. I think we recently ordered some air assets to the region as well. And all of it, we've also increased the bounty on Nicolas Maduro, the dictator of Venezuela, whom Secretary of State Rubio has said is an illegitimate leader and has got to go. And so this kind of operation against the Tren de Aragua, terrorists and traffickers is related, I think, to this increased pressure on Venezuela. And then the other side of it is, of course, the ongoing litigation over the president's ability to deport the gang members speedily and with as little review as possible. That's tied up in the courts, and the Supreme Court is eventually going to rule on it as well. And so suggesting that we are at war with this traffickers, this gang, these terrible people, by actually taking some out, may help the president's position not only with deterring Maduro, but also telling the courts that yes, we are at war with this narco-terrorist organization.
Interesting point. I hadn't thought about that. I spent about 45 minutes last night, Matt, with an old colleague from the Reagan administration, Ricardo, I call him. And Ricardo and I were going round and round. Of course, we know George H.W. Bush ordered the invasion of Panama. The invasion of Panama, in which 23 Americans were killed, 3 civilians in addition to the military, about 500 plus Panamanians killed. We got Noriega, brought him back to the United States after a couple of weeks. Big deal. No authorization for the use of military force. The only difference is Panama had declared war on the United States. Noriega was stupider than Maduro, maybe. But Maduro's almost there. Do you think that the Bush precedent from 1989 serves as a blanket for President Trump in 2025?
Well, I think that presidents have pretty extraordinary authority in the realm of foreign affairs and their ability to act against threats to the United States. It's not just Panama. Of course, we had a very controversial decision by Barack Obama to get involved in the operation to topple Muammar Gaddafi in Libya in 2011. I don't remember an AUMF passed for that.
Yep.
So the president has these authorities under the Constitution. What I think is important, Hugh, is I would like to see more effort by the administration talking about what's going on. And because I think most Americans would agree with the president's methods and his objectives here. I think most Americans understand that the drug problem in this country has torn us apart. It's led to so many different fatalities, and that it's connected to the problem of illegal immigration and crime, right? All Trump's political strengths, politically salient issues. And so just a little bit more messaging saying this is what we're doing, this is how Maduro is connected, and it's how we're making America safer, I think would go a long way in reassuring people that the president has this authority, and he's on the right path, I think, policy-wise.
You know, I spent about an hour on the show on the day of the strike taking calls, and it was 20-0 or 22-0 in support of the strike. Now, that's self-selecting callers to a talk show. However, I heard the phrase again and again and again, that's what I voted for. 30 seconds, Matt. What's that mean? That's what I voted for.
A president who acts decisively to protect the United States and American citizens. That's what they voted for.
That's what I think. Matt, it's already Shabbat in Israel, so I don't expect to get much from the Times of Israel over the weekend. But right before late last night and then into early morning hours today, it became clear that the IDF is much deeper into Gaza City offensive than I expected or knew. And Israeli media sources hadn't told us about it until the high rise came down today. Do you think that they are doing the Winston Churchill thing, that truth is so important in wartime it must be protected by a bodyguard of lies?
I think that's what we're seeing. I mean, this is not just Winston Churchill, it's also Israel, which is known for daring raids and secret operations and intelligence coups. And what's, unusual, in fact, about the Gaza war is that the sort of amazing intelligence that allowed Israel to take out a Hamas member visiting an Iranian president's inauguration, or to take out Hassan Nasrallah in a bunker underground, or to ferry the Iranian nuclear archive out of Iran in secret, or to build drone factories inside Iran when eventually the war between Iran and Israel leading to Operation Midnight Hammer broke out earlier this summer. We haven't seen that in Gaza up until right about now. And I also have been impressed by the secrecy and the surprise that the IDF have utilized in these opening stages. They were spending a lot of time, Hugh, telling us that they wouldn't begin entering Gaza City for weeks, if not months. And now we see that they have control, they say, of over 40% of the city so far. So this is a good sign, I think, that the Israelis are acting decisively with the support of the United States to lay the groundwork for an end to this war in the coming months.
The takedown of that high rise is extraordinary because it looked like a controlled demolition of the sort we saw with the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. Have you seen that video?
Yeah, I caught a snippet of it. We haven't seen much of this, though we know the IDF does it. These buildings, as Prime Minister Netanyahu explained to Bill Hemmer of Fox earlier this summer, they are so booby-trapped, they are so compromised that you can't leave them standing, or else it will be a threat to everyone, not just the Israeli soldiers, but to the Palestinians living there. The only way to handle it and to make the situation safer is to actually do the controlled demolition and blow up the building, which, by the way, also affects the tunnels that we know are underneath Gaza, like some kind of devilish metro. So yeah, it's an incredible feat.
Haviv Redigur told me yesterday is now a war of demolition, and he is right. If you know anything about the title charts of American politics, you know that the Republicans are likely to lose the House in 2026. Sometimes it doesn't happen. George W. Bush kept it in 2002, but they're likely to. So, Matt Continetti, I'm keeping a list of the articles of impeachment that the Democrats will bring if and when they get back into power. And I think article number 1 is going to be failure to enforce the TikTok ban. And article number 2 is going to be the Venezuelan boat strike. What do you think about both of those as Democratic props?
I'm not sure that they would rank high on the Democrats' list, to be honest to you. I think there are good constitutional arguments to be made about the Trump policies on either of those items. I think the Democrats, they're just going to reach for whatever they have nearby. And I think it's going to start actually with immigration. And they're going to say failure to execute the laws, or they're going to talk about the universities. The fascinating about the Democrats is they don't care about the Constitution. They care about how Trump policy has affected their prized possessions, their constituency groups. And so I think any bill of indictment against Trump to impeach him, it's going to be very broad, and it's just going to be about how Trump has hurt the Democratic Party and its clients.
Oh, good keystone or Rosetta Stone for understanding how the Democrats operate. I do want to remind the audience that when Richard Nixon was impeached in 1974, Dems threw in an article about Vietnam for good measure, the incursion into Cambodia. That's why I'm keeping the Venezuelan boat on my bingo card for impeachment articles. Now, Matt, 2 articles today. 2 of the most prestigious media platforms in the world. Wall Street Journal, how China's new naval and air sites would aid an attack on Taiwan. The Times of London, target Taiwan, how China's invasion could unfold. What do you, and they both say 2027. What does Matt Continetti think?
I think that's what the experts say, 2027. There's an election scheduled in Taiwan, I think in 28. And I've always been of the view that Xi Jinping will wait to see what happens in that election, and that if the pro-China party wins the Taiwanese election, he may delay any invasion because he would see it as a way of basically getting what he wants through peaceful political diplomatic means. On the other hand, if the pro-independence party were to win that election, then I think you would see some type of military action. So 27, 28, I do think that's the window where we should be most concerned that China would act.
Now, Admiral Paparo, who is the head of Pacific Command, has said his job is to turn the Taiwan Strait into a hellscape for the People's Liberation Army and Navy. And I think we've got stuff that we don't know about at DARPA and drones that we don't know about and all sorts of stuff we don't know about to do that. But it would require someone to pull the trigger. Do you think Donald Trump would pull the trigger on China coming across the Taiwan Strait?
Well, I think he would, Hugh, to be honest. The messages coming from the White House right now about China are not the same messages as we saw even a few months ago, where I think President Trump was trying to strike a very kind of conciliatory tone, trying to get that big trade deal with China that he's wanted for so long. In the past week, we have these very kind of snarky, sarcastic messages to Xi Jinping talking about conspiring against the United States. He had one today attacking the Indian Prime Minister Modi for being so friendly to Xi and to Putin during the recent World War II commemorations in Beijing, where he said, these are dark forces at work. I'm paraphrasing. So I think Trump has taken a pretty negative stance toward Xi Jinping in recent weeks. And let's not forget, Trump is not an isolationist. He doesn't want wars, and he wants to end wars when they break out. But he is not averse to military force, as we saw in Iran and as we just saw this week off the coast of Venezuela.
Now, the both articles suggest that because of the unpredictability of President Trump, China might act preemptively against carriers in the region, which of course means we have to respond. Do you ever lie awake thinking about that? Because that would be bad. That would be World War III.
It would be. I guess I don't rate that probability as very high based on China's approach in the past. It seems to me that the Chinese Communist Party has been extremely deliberate in its moves. It prefers a very quiet, slow stranglehold over Taiwan rather than these kind of spectacular attacks. But you can't rule it out. And of course, if something were to happen, like you suggest, I don't think the attack would be limited to America. I think that they would also be attacking Japan, possibly Korea. And so, yeah, you would have a regional conflict breakout. Remember, we already have wars in Europe with Ukraine. We have this war in the Middle East, this long-running war between Israel and Iran, where the most active front right now is Gaza. To add a third theater, the Indo-Pacific, Taiwan Strait, we would be in World War III. And historians would look back and say, World War III probably began in 2014 with Vladimir Putin's annexation of the Crimean Peninsula.
I can't top that because I agree with it. I would also just refer people to the price of gold, which is $3,646 an ounce today, up 1% again, and it's central banks that are buying it. Matt Continetti, thank you as always. Follow Matt at Continetti on X. It's pretty easy to follow him there and everything that he writes at the Free Press and Commentary. Listen to the Commentary podcast as well. Let me do the market recap brought to you by American Federal as we are 10 minutes away from the close. Gold is at $3,646 an ounce right now. AmericanFederal.com, reliable buyers and sellers of gold. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. The Dow today is not doing jumping jacks. All right, it's down 0.5%. The S&P is down about 1/3%, 0.38, and the Nasdaq is off 0.1% with 10 minutes left in the trading day. The job numbers confused everyone, but not the market for gold. Gold just roared ahead. Again, $3,646 right now. If you're going to buy gold, call Nick Grovich at 800-221-7694. 800-221-7694, or go to AmericanFederal.com. Deal with someone you can trust, and I trust Nick. No, I haven't forgotten my relief factor. I know my regular audience, whether on the Salem News Channel or in the car or listening on the Salem Radio Network or any of our great affiliates, want to know, did I forget my relief factor? Of course not. Tomorrow is Saturday. Therefore, I've got to have, I go farther and faster on Saturdays, at least when it's not stormy, and it's not going to be stormy. So I take my relief factor on Friday in the first hour, per usual. And it is that easy to open, that easy to swallow. A little sip of Trader Joe's water and relief factor. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, omega. Down they go, and it works. The minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging fly away because it helps your body's anti-inflammatory system. I've been taking it for more than 12 years now, and it's the only supplement I've taken for more than 20 years. I'm not going to take any other supplement. I encourage you to call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, and get the starter pack for $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. Or go to their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. While I am selling, I want to sell you seniors. Well, really, more than seniors. Anyone over 50 on consumercellular.com/Hugh. consumercellular.com/Hugh. Their phone number is 800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Make sure you use my code Hugh25 when you call or when you go to consumercellular.com/Hugh if you want $5 off each of your first 5-month invoices. 5 monthly invoices, you'll save $25 over 5 months. Most importantly, you'll probably save a lot of money compared with your current cell phone cost. But you got to get your bill out to check it out. So before you call Consumer Cellular at 800-411-4454, get your phone bill out and be ready to find out. If I want unlimited data, if you're paying for that, wouldn't you rather have, if you're over 50, 2 lines of unlimited data for $60 a month? You're going to find out that's a lot cheaper than what you're paying for it. consumercellular.com/Hugh. My code is Hugh25. Finally, my WebRoot story of the day. WebRoot.com, WebRoot.com/Hugh. WebRoot.com/Hewitt, WebRoot.com/Hewitt. It's very easy to find a hacking story every day, but I don't often just walk into it. Over at Cleveland.com, Cleveland man charged in a $500,000 car dealership scam using fake titles. How do you suppose he found that? Well, by hacking into people's databases and on the dark web, which is why you need WebRoot.com/Hewitt. Now, they've got 2 packages. You can get the essentials, or you can get the WebRoot Total Protection. You'll get 50% off whether you pick A or B. You got to customize for your needs, WebRoot.com/Hewitt. But you're going to get a lot of protection against identity theft. You're going to get a password, control device. You're going to get a firewall, a network monitor. Most important of all, you're going to get advanced monitoring of the dark web to find out when indeed, instant credit updates, find out when indeed you've been hacked and you've lost control of your machine. You'll get restoration as well, and up to $1 million in protection for stolen funds from WebRoot.com/Hewitt. Go to WebRoot.com/Hewitt. And during the break, check it out. Joined by Ben Domenech, Fox News contributor, contributing editor at The Spectator. You can get Ben's podcast at the Big Ben Podcast, and I love it, and I recommend it highly. And, of course, he has his own newsletter at The Transom on Substack. Ben, I want to get into your cover story for The Spectator about the Mexican standoff and Donald Trump's increasing kinetic activity against the cartels. But before I do, it's been announced that Eric Adams has a press conference at 4:30. Speculation on X is that he will drop out. What do you think?
Well, I think that this has been sort of a long time coming, and I think that Eric Adams has, since the point at which it became clear he did not have a path to victory, been attempting to extract some kind of new opportunity from the Trump administration. Obviously, Donald Trump has already given him a pass in so many different respects on the legal challenges that he faced earlier. But it's also a situation where I think, the president really does care about New York. He still thinks of himself as a New Yorker, even though he is a Floridian. And he cares about the city in ways that I think other Republicans may not care as much. I think there are a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill from other states across the country who would say, hey, sure, elect Mamdani. Let's use him as an example of everything that the Democrats want to do to cities across this nation, and we can run against it. And I think for Trump, he doesn't like that idea. He doesn't like the idea that you're going to put New York through the ringer with this leftist, with this Marxist, really. Who
anti-Semitic Marxist.
Yeah, an anti-Semitic Marxist to boot, to actually put him in a place of power and just sort of gloat over the disaster that follows. I think Trump wants to make a difference there, and he believes that Andrew Cuomo would make a much better mayor, and he wants to clear a path. Now, I don't know if Eric Adams is going to announce anything related to that. I was just having a chat with your producer, Dwayne, and I said the funniest thing, of course, that Donald Trump could do would be to offer Eric Adams a golden parachute out by giving him authority as the attorney for the Southern District of New York, which would allow him to go on a vengeance tour unlike, I think, anything that we've seen before. But that's just too perfect to happen.
It is too perfect. I really can't get over it. I don't think Andrew Cuomo could win a two-person race. I'm wondering if Curtis Sliwa came out and named a deputy mayor, like Michael Bloomberg is going to be my deputy mayor, and he's already accepted, and here's my other deputy mayor. Does he have a prayer if he did that to do the John? Because I know Curtis, I like Curtis, but he doesn't have a prayer unless he does something.
No, he does not, and I just it's unfortunate. But look, this is a different New York than what we've lived with in the past, and the kind of Bloomberg era New York is something that really doesn't exist anymore. And you have this voting electorate now that is happy to entertain not just socialist ideas, but the craziest socialist. I mean, that people don't seem to understand. Mamdani makes AOC look moderate.
Yes.
I'm not kidding when I say that. It's like AOC is a pragmatic, version of this compared to what Mamdani represents.
Yeah, she's like a Swedish socialist, and he's the real deal Marxist. And
exactly.
The commodification of housing. There are certain buzzwords which trigger me, and I know what they mean, and it means chaos. I was on Fox News earlier today. I said, look, he doesn't want any more money. He doesn't need any more money. Mamdani, he can only spend $8 million. He's going to use earned media. He's going to win, and it's going to be a disaster. Mark Levin was on here last week. He said, don't be complacent about this. It's the most important city in the world, and it will be thrown into chaos by him.
It absolutely will.
Now, I want to move into chaos south of the border. I think your cover story for The Spectator on the rising violence that Donald Trump is going to use against the cartels, which you also talked about on the Big Ben podcast today, or 2 days ago. I listened to it today. I always listen to it on Friday, is fascinating because, of course, I don't know that a lot of people believe he had the authority to strike the Venezuelan boat. I do. George H.W. Bush invaded Panama and took out Noriega, and 23 American soldiers died, and 3 American civilians, and 500 Panamanians. And Bill Clinton did Yugoslavia, and Barack Obama did Libya. And you get to do this if you're president. What I didn't see coming, what I heard from you is, Mexico, open your eyes, because Donald Trump's coming for your people, too.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I think people have underestimated about this, which is that the level of trust, the level of distinction that we're seeing in terms of this administration's attitude towards Mexico is fundamentally different than what it has been in the past. They no longer are willing to accept a situation where basically the level of peace, the level of quiet on our border is determined by the Mexican government in tandem with these narco-terrorists, with these cartel organizations, to a degree that they have the control, they have the determination. And I think that there is a very much an awareness on the part of the White House and Stephen Miller and other key figures that everything that is happening on the border right now is due to what the cartels themselves have decided about this moment, that it's too risky for them to engage in the kind of behavior that they engaged in under the Biden presidency, and they just plan to wait it out. So you have fat years and you have lean years. You're going to have some lean years under Donald Trump, but then we're going to be right back to doing the things that we were doing before. That's not acceptable to this White House, and because of that, they are now stepping up their action. And the key aspect of this that people need to understand is this is not the Border Patrol. This is not ICE. This is a DOD operation. It is something that is flowing through DOD. They are the ones who have war gamed this out and have their plans in place about what they can do, what they're capable of. And the Mexican military is not designed to be a military that fends off the kind of drone attacks, the type of technology that the American military can deploy against cartel targets that are, universally connected to corrupt individuals who occupy key positions, often in the federal government of Mexico itself, and are, and have benefited significantly from their tenure under the prior President AMLO, and continue to benefit from it. And that's something that I think is just going to come to a real clash point between us and Mexico in pretty short order. They are trying to do this because they want to force the Mexican government to do what they have been unwilling to do, which is to control cartel activity, crack down on it, and deal with the problem themselves. And if they won't do it, then the Americans are going to do it for them.
Yeah, I want to put on the record what you said on Big Ben. I think we are about to see activity as it regards these cartels that we have never seen before. A level of stepped-up hostilities that is no longer interested in capturing these different criminals and putting them on trial or in seizing their drugs, but in destroying them and destroying them in targeted ways. I would add to that, the DepSec of state, number 2 at state, is Christopher Landau, who is our ambassador to Mexico in Trump 1. Marco Rubio knows this problem. Christopher Landau knows this problem, and Pete Hegseth will execute on the problem. Southern Command's pretty good. It's usually not this hot. But I think I wouldn't underestimate anything here, and Sheinbaum is just not delivering.
Yeah, and Sheinbaum, and this is the thing, has played a pretty good game with a weak hand to this point. And as I discussed in the piece, it's one of these things where, the appreciation of her as being kind of a true believer version of leftism, of the kind of, Marxist socialist approach, that the utopian approach that AMLO advocated for. She's the heir who actually believes all the nonsense as opposed to him who was just selling it. But the problem is for her that she is not respected by a lot of the cronies and the various people who benefited from this relationship with these narco-terror organizations over the years, who are all still very close to AMLO and view him as essentially, the godfather, the guy who's actually in charge behind the scenes. And so, look, this is going to create, I think, real flashpoints here. We see the initial, stepped up activity in terms of this boat taken out with these Venezuelan cartel folks. The idea that the president doesn't have the right to do that in international waters is absurd, by the way.
I was going to ask you that because I think it's commander-in-chief power and he doesn't need an authorization for the use of military force. Do you agree with that?
I 100% agree with that. And you obviously cited many examples that could be raised in similar terms. Look, I think Marco Rubio has a clear eye on this. I think Pete Hegseth has a clear eye on this. But by the way, Hugh, this truly does put the lie to all the people who falsely claimed over the years, initially before his first term, less so, when he was running for his second, since he had proven some of the things he was willing to do, that Donald Trump is some kind of isolationist, that he wants a retreat of American power, no, he cares about the Western Hemisphere. He cares about it in a way that connects back to the Jacksonian era of American views of foreign policy and protecting things that are close to us. I mean, you can talk about the flights of fancy, I guess, around Canada. I think the Greenland thing is actually a little bit more real, but it's one of these things where the president, I think, understands we have allowed this Western Hemisphere to be controlled by enemies of America for far too long and have them dictating the terms of how our border works, the flow of trafficking, the flow of fentanyl, et cetera, and he doesn't want to accept that anymore.
Ben, I asked Matt Continenti earlier, if the title charts of American politics hold and the Republicans lose the House, the only thing Democrats will be able to do for 2 years is impeach Donald Trump. And I think they're going to impeach him over TikTok not enforcing the law. And I think they're going to impeach him over the Venezuelan boat. And it doesn't really matter about the merits. All that matters. Do you have anything else on your list that they're going to impeach him over?
Gosh, they'll definitely do. One of them has to be immigration related. Would they?
Continetti said the same thing. Yes.
I didn't know that he was going to say that, but would they dare impeach him over the Maryland man? I mean, it's very. They will do something that is designed to appeal to their progressive base on the idea that we should have open borders and anybody should be able to be here and no human is illegal and blah, 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 blah. They are going to have to do that. How they find a way to do that could be thorny for them. But I think it would be something along the lines of, he has illegally deported X number of people. Or something along
absolutely. You're right. That's my third article. TikTok is actually a serious conversation to be had about whether or not he's abdicating his authority here when he should be enforcing the law. Let me ask you quickly, did the Israelis do it again in Gaza City, meaning surprise the world? We're not going to start for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden the tower comes down this morning. Are they?
I think that they are doing it again, yes. And look, this has become an item of just repeat action in terms of their part, that they really do. They view the opportunities as they are, and they assess them, and then they say, "Look, we got to move." And that's, I think, something that has played to their benefit. The only problem, as I see it, is that Israel is now they're surrounded in so many different ways, in the public square, in the international sphere, et cetera. And I think that their attitude towards this is, we're going to do what we believe we have to do, and damn the consequences.
Okay, quick question though, Ben. Do you think they cooked up the leak from the security cabinet of Zamir yelling at Netanyahu? Do you think that's all just made up?
I don't think that's made up. Do you think it's? I mean, what is that your opinion?
I thought it was real until this morning. But if they're 40% into Gaza, it doesn't make any sense other than an information operation.
No, I mean it's very. Look, I would not put it past them. Let's put it that way. But I still initially at least took it at face value. But I think that this is a situation where the Israelis have such a commitment to this now. They're all the way in. They're pot committed, and they understand what they have to do in order to exact the kind of result that they want to achieve, and they're going to continue to do it. And there's not.
Well, they have Bobo-dolled me again. I don't know about other people, but I got Bobo-dolled into not knowing what they can and will do in the short term. Ben, we have to march through two stories fairly quickly here. The first is, if CBS, the new CBS, does in fact acquire the Free Press, what is the significance of Barry Weiss getting a senior editorial position at the Tiffany Network?
So this is very significant for a number of reasons, and I should preface it by saying I was at CBS 2014 through 2017 as a contributor there during the kind of John Dickerson era of Face the Nation and the like, and caught the beginnings of the Margaret Brennan tale of idiocy that plays out now. And I just have to say that the network is in a very dire position in terms of the loss that they've had of respect, the loss that they've had in terms of being, one of the last networks that was viewed as being fair to Republicans in some respects, especially because of everything that played out with the Kamala Harris interview. The Ellison purchase of Paramount, CBS, et cetera, is enormously significant, and they were already telling signs that he wanted to have a standout, difference-making, contrarian approach. And that's what I think he wants to achieve with this potential Free Press deal and with Barry. Now, I will say, as someone who knows Barry a little bit, she's someone who definitely appreciates legacy media and wants to make legacy media better as opposed to burn it all to the ground, as some folks on the right do. And I respect that opinion. But I also think the culture clash with CBS, which is so long in the tooth and includes a lot of major figures who are still around and still in the buildings, I think that that's going to be very difficult to navigate. It's not an upstart new network. It's something that has its own culture. It has its own rules. It has its own expectations, and they're going to rebel completely against this. And the question will be whether Ellison gives them their walking papers, or whether he tries to force it into something that works together. And we'll see. Maybe
Barry Weiss has got. Look, I only know her from being a guest on this show, and I've never met her physically in the same room. But she's got more courage than most people to take on the New York Times and CBS. And I know it's a lot of money, but it's also, she's fiercely independent. And boy, if she brings her contributors, Douglas Murray, Aviv Redig-Gur, Matt Continetti, and her Mary Baron de prankster, Uri Berliner, and they all take over 60 Minutes, I'll start watching again. And I grew up on that.
And I advocate for her to fill the Andy Rooney role. She'd be good at
well
that,
said.
actually.
All right, last question. China is the subject today. Front page stories in the Wall Street Journal and the Times of London about their coming 2027 invasion of Taiwan. What do you credit those worries, Ben Domenech?
Well, I do believe that this is something where there's been a ticking clock here for a long time that people expect is closer to the end now than we've seen in a long time. And look, the continued talks that have been reported by the Financial Times and others between the United States and Taiwan regarding their defense is something that I think is of huge importance. I also don't think that a lot has been said publicly on this to the degree that it needs to be. The experts are paying attention, but I think we need to have more people out there speaking about the importance of this and what a Chinese takeover of Taiwan would mean for American markets, for our trade internationally, and everything else. Because you can't just have this pop up as an issue for the average American and not have them understand the risks involved.
No, it's guns of August stuff. And the folks who follow, like former Secretary of State Pompeo and former National Security O'Brien, they know what this means. I don't know that Donald Trump would order the shoot, but I do think Xi Jinping might be tempted to preempt.
I think that you are correct on those points, but I also do not think that Donald Trump likes situations where he feels like things are happening that are out of his control or reach. And that's generally true of his approach to foreign policy. He wants to be able to be someone who can affect the outcome of these things in America's benefit. And I believe that in this situation, there are enough people who are still in the orbit who share those concerns of people, at least in the first Trump administration, that this is something that is front of mind for them. I just think that it needs to be something that is leaned into more and is more publicly addressed in ways that it hasn't yet been.
Then let me conclude with where we began. You suggested that the cartels might dummy down for 4 years and wait out Trump before returning to do business in the fat years. Do you think Xi Jinping might have the same attitude towards Donald Trump?
He might, and I think that part of that is just Trump's natural unpredictability. He might view, a future president, a Vance or, God forbid, a Newsom or somebody like that as being someone who is more directionally clear in terms of their activity, as opposed to the wild card that Trump represents. And look, I think that that's been something that the president has played to his benefit, as much as the legacy media has described it as chaotic. And something of a nature where everybody's running around with their hair on fire. The truth is that he has consistently used that, I believe, to America's benefit, and it could be one item that proves once again that this is the kind of situation where people don't necessarily want to get involved in a conflict with someone like that.
I think you're right, and just even the prospect of having a Gavin Newsom versus a J.D. Vance.
I'm sorry to.
No, it's worth waiting for.
Friday,
It's worth waiting for if you're Xi Jinping, because they're transplanting organs into each other. If we believe
Ezra Klein, I was just watching an interview. Ezra Klein just did an interview with Neil Brennan where he basically came out and endorsed him and just said, he's the best thing we've got going on right now. And I just,
oh gosh,
no.
The governor won't even come on this show, and so I think he's glass-jaw Gavin, but we'll find out. Ben Domenech.
He should absolutely come on this show.
Oh, he's promised to like 10 times. He tells me every time I email him, we'll work it out. Never shows up. I think he's got a glass jaw. And we'll wait and we'll see. Ben, thank you. Everyone, go get your Big Ben podcast. Go subscribe to The Transom over at Substack. And by all means, find thespectator.com. the Mexican standoff story. Maybe they'll give it to you for free. It's really brilliant. Thank you, Ben Domenech. Follow him on X at @BDomenech. This is my Relief Factor bag. I am in the Relief Factor studio, and I want to remind you that I'm able to broadcast from anywhere because of Relief Factor. They go where I need to be, and Relief Factor keeps me moving as fast as I have to move to cover the news at the speed of 2025, 2026. And that means as well on Saturday morning, getting the 10K at pace in. Now, my pace is a lot slower than it used to be, but I got 24 miles down already this week, going to break 30 for maybe the first time in 2 months. And that means maybe I'd be a little bit sore on Sunday, but I'm not worried about it because I got my Relief Factor in the first hour. And I remind you now, call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, and say, I want to try that starter pack that Hewitt talks about. $19.95, right? 3-week trial, and that's exactly what it is. You take 3 packs a day for the first week, 2 packs a day for the second week, and then you're on to the 1 pack a day because you have gotten the levels of icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega up in your body to where they help your body's anti-inflammatory system get rid of the minor aches and pains. Only supplement I've taken in more than 20 years, the only one I will take because it's the only one I need, but I do need it, and you will find that you do as well, whether you are a runner, a jogger, a walker, a swimmer, a weightlifter, or a volleyball player on the sand in Southern California, whatever it is that gives you aches and pains, and it might just be commuting, relieffactor.com. Get the starter pack at relieffactor.com. John Williams is the chief economist and the president of the American Legislative Exchange Council, great sponsors of the program. He's a friend of mine as well, and he has to talk about the law with me this week. So he's the economist, I'm the lawyer, but I'm very interested, Jonathan, that Alec is filing amicus briefs. Tell me about the case.
Well, it's really an interesting case, and it's a key case, Hugh, in terms of this whole problem that we've been seeing across the country that President Trump's trying to address. Our good friend and ALEC alumnus Jim Jordan at House Judiciary, and that, of course, is the weaponization of government. And in the case that we just filed this brief in, and filed a brief to the United States Supreme Court, is dealing with a crisis pregnancy center out of the state of New Jersey that had been targeted by the New Jersey Attorney General, Mr. Platkin, and had been subpoenaed for their donor records, asking for all donors to that pregnancy resource center. And it's clearly an example of big government overreach targeting potentially a group that they don't agree with. And as when the folks at the Pregnancy Resource Center went to get relief from the federal court system, they were denied that by the district court and by the Third Circuit, saying that the subpoena had not been enforced, and so they didn't have the ability to get relief from federal courts. We thought that was wrong. We think that the whole idea of weaponization of government, ALEC has been the recipient, unfortunately, of that in states like Minnesota and Maine over the years have targeted ALEC unfairly. Thankfully, we've been exonerated, but not without the cost of just tons of resources, whether it's staff time or hiring lawyers to defend ourselves from this. So we have personal experience being targeted by liberal officials in blue states, and that's why we wanted to come to the defense of our friends there in New Jersey.
Well, I applaud you because this question has been asked and answered by the Supreme Court in the past, by the NAACP when segregationists wanted their donors, and the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to put those people at risk. It's a freedom of speech issue. So good on alec.org/u. If you want to find out what ALEC is doing, make sure you go to alec.org/u. Jonathan, I want to make sure I get to the Kansas experiment because I've heard about it for years. I want you to explain what it is and why it's a myth.
Well, this has been something in my career where, I've not seen a lie get this much attention, and that is the lie around the Kansas tax experiment. And this is something that Sam Brownback, when he was governor, worked with his legislature to work to try to kill the income tax. And there's lots of issues why it went a little bit sideways. One of the big ones is something that, ALEC, that we often talk about, which is you must match tax cuts with good spending policy and make sure that you don't increase spending while you're cutting taxes. Lots of political reasons why that ended up happening in Kansas. But essentially what happened, but from day one, the kind of fake news economist Paul Krugman at the New York Times wrote a column about how the Kansas tax cuts were destroying the state. And then for about 10 years, Hugh, everywhere I went if we had good ALEC members trying to cut taxes in their state, the first argument out of the gate would be you can't cut taxes because look what it did to the state of Kansas. Well, the good news, Hugh, after over a decade now, Kansas just going through lots of issues trying to talk about this, and they ended up raising taxes as a result because of their spending policies. The good news is Senate President Ty Masterson, ALEC national chair from last year, he and his colleagues in the Kansas legislature led the effort to create a flat tax. They were part of this flat tax revolution that we've talked about. So this Kansas story that started out in a very troubled way was targeted from the left. They tried to use it to scare away every state trying to cut taxes. Now, because of bold conservative leadership from people like Senator Masterson, they've come full circle, and they're going to have a 4% flat tax, working on making it even better in the years ahead.
Good for Kansas. They got to keep up with Tennessee, Florida, Texas, and even places like Arizona, which are 2.5%, but they're getting there. Last story, the national debt. Now, it's not going to be a surprise that you and I are concerned about the national debt, but I am surprised that Congress agrees. They really don't act like it, but why does it matter, Jonathan Williams?
Well, we're at 37 trillion reasons why as of just earlier this summer. And it's a huge area where now the interest costs on the national debt obviously becoming one of the top line items of government spending overall. And so we just launched this new ALEC state legislator letter. We're working with our friends from the financial officers through the State Financial Officers Foundation. Our good friend, the comptroller of the state of Indiana, Elise Nishal, has been a great partner of ours on this. And we're asking for Congress to basically do what the states do every single year. That is, try to live within their means, have some sort of a balanced budget discussion, and we cannot continue down this trajectory of continuing to add more and more debt. I applaud, obviously, President Trump, the DOGE effort, all those important things that we've begun to see some progress, but we have a whole lot more of work to be done, including common sense things like Medicaid reforms and work requirements in the big, beautiful bill, as we've talked about many times, Hugh.
And we've got to look at entitlement reform eventually, because we're going to be bust if we don't. Jonathan Williams from ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, thank you. Go to alec.org/Hugh. Get the State of the State newsletter and be smart about what's going on in our laboratory of the states, alec.org/Hugh. It's Friday in the fall. That means it's a football Friday, and that means I'm pleased to welcome back Doug Lesmerises, one of the co-hosts of the Bill and Doug Show, which is over at Substack. It is the best football show on air, available anywhere, because Doug and Bill are both ball guys, and they connect the athletes, the coaches in the front office with the fans by explaining the former to the latter. Doug, welcome back. I think the Bill and Doug Show is fabulous, and I see you got 3,000 subscribers in like a week. So obviously a bunch of other people think it's fabulous as well. Congratulations on that.
I also, Hugh, just might be old and maybe have been around a long time. I've been covering Ohio State football and college football for 20 years. So people can't get rid of me and they don't know what else to do. So we're on Substack. We're also on YouTube. We're also on your podcast feeds. Bill and Doug Show. If you like college football, we're everywhere.
And Bill, Doug, what I said about you and Bill is very sincere. You break it down for people like me, a fan who has in his office the front page of the Plain Dealer from when the Buckeyes won in January. But I don't understand half of what's going on in the game. Is that your job? Is that what you guys are supposed to do? Make it more fun for me?
Well, the fans are the most important part of sports. And I feel like sometimes a lot of conversations around sports right now are yelling at fans, that they're too passionate or they don't express themselves the right way. And so we do want to have that connection. I always say, you know, there are a million people who would love to be in an Ohio State press box or a post-game show at a game, but you can't put a million people in there. So we are the representatives. So it's our job to make it fun for fans, to explain it to fans. And sometimes, like, listen, Bill knows ball. Hugh, it's just my job. There's a lot of other people who are doing much more meaningful lines of work. They're driving ambulances, they're welding things. I'm just shouting into a microphone, but I have the time to think about football in the way you don't. So if I don't make it more fun and explain it to you, then I'm failing.
You're the most fun since Pete Franklin, and that is saying a lot. So, Doug, what we're going to do every week on Friday football season is ask you for one game on the college schedule, one game on the NFL schedule, and then for an update on our Buckeyes and Browns because we love them more than anything. Take it away.
All right. So I think from a college football standpoint, I love these intersectional national battles between blue blood programs. And this week we have a great one. It's Michigan at Oklahoma, 7:30 on ABC. They've only ever played once in the 1976 Orange Bowl. Michigan is the leading team ever in the history of college football, the most wins. Oklahoma's tied for 5th. These programs are as good as it gets. Sharon Moore, the Michigan head coach, they did some stuff off the field. They got dinged on that. He's getting suspended for a couple games, but he played at Oklahoma. He didn't want to miss this game, so Michigan massaged this. So he's doing his suspension the next 2 weeks. He's not going to miss this game. And Michigan has a true freshman quarterback. There was a time you wouldn't see many true freshmen, Hugh, but among the best teams in college football, 4 true freshmen started last week. They all played well. Bryce Underwood was the #1 recruit in the country. He's starting for Michigan, and this is a great talent who was great against a weaker opponent last week, and you get to see him against one of the best teams ever in Oklahoma.
That's our college game, 7:30 Saturday, NFL, Doug Lesmerises.
So listen, you don't need me on to tell you this, Hugh. Baltimore-Buffalo on Sunday night is awesome. I think they might be the 2 best teams in the NFL this year. I'm picking Baltimore to make the Super Bowl. A lot of people are picking Buffalo to make the Super Bowl. So I'm not going to go there because anybody could tell you that. Week 1 it's personal, right? You've been waiting all offseason to play. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the New York Jets are playing each other, and they swapped quarterbacks. Last year, Justin Fields started the year, former Ohio State Buckeye, started the year as the Steelers quarterback. He's now the Jets quarterback. Last year, Aaron Rodgers was the Jets quarterback. He's now the Steelers quarterback. And Mike Tomlin, the Pittsburgh coach, this is his 20th season. He's never had a losing record. Aaron Rodgers last year with the Jets was 5-12. So Mike Tomlin, but we don't know how good Aaron Rodgers used to be, right? So can the Steelers still be the Steelers of the Tomlin era? This is a nice little personal grudge match. So there's lots of great games to watch, but watch that one because it's personal.
All right, and then give us the update on the Buckeyes and the Browns as we go into our last 2 minutes here.
All right, so you want the good news first or the bad news first, Hugh? I don't know which one to start with.
Bad news.
All right, the Browns might be the worst team in the NFL. But here's the thing. Kevin Stefanski has been the coach for a long time. I have very large questions about whether Kevin Stefanski is the coach to ever get the Browns to the Super Bowl, and that's what fans like you want. However, he might be a guy who's pretty good at elevating a bad team to mediocre. They opened with the Bengals. I don't think they're going to win, but the Browns might win 6 games when a lot of people think they're going to win 3. Is that good news, Hugh? I can't tell if that's good news. It's just going to hurt their draft pick.
No, that's bad news. Let's move on quickly. As I've been a season ticket holder since 1999, I'm getting older. They got to win soon. Tell me about the Buckeyes because they look great to me, the average fan last week.
Defending national champ, it's hard to repeat. Nick Saban did it once. Georgia did it a couple years ago. I thought Ohio State would lose to Texas last week. They won. I think now they are not just #1, which they are in all the polls. I think they're the team to beat once again in college football. Penn State's going to be good. Miami's going to be good. Georgia's going to be good. LSU's going to be good. But I think Ohio State, they look so good on defense, Hugh. I think they are officially in a front runner to win this thing. And that would be, they've won 9 national titles at Ohio State. They've never repeated. So they have a chance to do something that's never happened in Ohio State history.
Quick question to exit, Doug. I want to make sure people know Bill and Doug Show. Just Google it with Substack, and it's worth the money. It really is that good. Bill and Doug Show, Substack. Pay for it. You'll thank me for that. Here's the exit. What's going to be louder, Ohio State last week or the Big House up north in November?
Probably in November. Now, listen, it was a great home field environment for Ohio State. They really brought it in that noon game. But I think at its core, Hugh, as college football becomes more national, those rivalries are still the core of the sport, and there's still nothing better than Ohio State, Michigan. And by the way, Michigan's won 4 straight. The Michigan fans are going to be really loud about trying to get it to 5, and Ohio State fans, a couple of them will show up and try and break this losing streak too.
I saw Ohio State win there in 1982, and I'm hoping they pull it off again. Doug Lesmerises, thank you. Follow him on X at Doug Lesmerises, and go and Google the Bill and Doug Show and Substack, and you will thank me. Best ball show out there every day, in and out. Thank you, Doug Lesmerises. Time on Friday for the Poet Laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Joe, your hometown's mayor is stepping aside, according to press reports. I don't think you can make a poem about that since it's just happening. Give us what you got, though, friend.
I could just say hallelujah. Someone needs to step aside, and someone needs to step up. You know, if the Tiffany Network, CBS, is putting the old gang back together, they should hire me, because then they would get Charles Osgood and Andy Rooney in one paycheck. I mean, no one more curmudgeonly or lyrical than I am, and this is how it sounds. Some governors and mayors, they like to rail and holler, defending their constituents who want to live in squalor, standing for the principle for which they vow to fight, that being prey to criminals should be a civil right. They've come to the conclusion, which they've run through their committees, that crime is just a price you pay for living in big cities. They also like to argue, which I find rather odd, that the rights of every person do not derive from God. They publish referenda and promulgate positions supporting the above and other ludicrous positions. They can't believe the things they say, and say with deep conviction, like giving out syringes will lead to less addiction. The ideas that they shepherd are leading lambs to slaughter, like trying to fight fires without sufficient water. Even more astounding, they shout this nonsense loudly, calling our attention the way they're foolish proudly. I think they will discover, when the final vote is rendered, that they'll pay a price in power for the freedom they've surrendered. That's Step Aside by Tarzana Joe.
That's wonderful, Joe. I worry, though, you've just reminded me of January fires as we enter fire season in Southern California. Have they filled up the reservoirs yet?
I have been trying to find out the answer to that question, and it's an unequivocal I don't know.
All right, next week. In the meantime, for all your poetry needs, write Joe at tarzanajoe@reagan.com. The summer is over. I hope fall is busy for you, Joe, is it?
A lot of October weddings coming up.
And if you need a wedding, an anniversary, a retirement, or any celebration at all, get your verse first from Tarzana Joe. Write to him at tarzanajoe@reagan.com, tarzanajoe@reagan.com, or go to tarzanajoe.com and just hit the button, I need a poem, tarzanajoe.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Hugh.
And ahead to the Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arnn as we continue our series on Winston Churchill and this book, The Gathering Storm. And if you heard me talking to Ben Domenech and Matt Continetti earlier about the stories in the Wall Street Journal and the Times of London today on the preparations for war by Xi Jinping, then The Gathering Storm is more relevant than we would have ever imagined, because we're right back in the 30s and we're sleepwalking through history is what it's called. Can't afford to do it, wouldn't be wise, wouldn't be prudent. Dr. Arnn is here to help stop it.